I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror of my Lincoln Park apartment, trying to convince myself that tonight would be different. The black cocktail dress I'd bought specifically for this occasion hung perfectly on my frame, and I'd spent an hour making sure my blonde hair fell in soft waves around my shoulders. But despite looking the part, my hands were trembling as I applied a final coat of lipstick. "You can do this, Nick," I whispered to myself, gripping the edge of the marble countertop. "It's just a party. You work with these people every day." The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been at Peterson Marketing for 2 years, and most of my colleagues still called me the quiet one from the corner office. Not that I had a corner office. I was crammed into a cubicle near the copy machine, but somehow that detail always got lost in their descriptions of me. My roommate Sarah knocked on the bathroom door. "Nick, your Uber's here in 5 minutes. Are you ready?" "Almost," I called back, though I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready for what I was about to do. The company holiday party was being held at the signature room on the 95th floor of the John Hancock building. It was the kind of venue that screamed success and ambition, two things I desperately wanted to embody tonight. When Mr. Peterson announced last week that they were promoting someone to senior marketing coordinator, I knew this party would be my chance to finally step out of the shadows. I'd been preparing for weeks. I'd researched conversation starters, practiced my elevator pitch in front of the mirror, and even bought a book called Speaking Up: How to Be Heard in Any Room. The author promised that with the right techniques, anyone could command attention and respect. I'd highlighted half the pages and filled notebooks with strategies. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her red hair perfectly styled and her confidence radiating like a warm glow. She worked in sales at a tech company downtown and had never met a room she couldn't work. "You look amazing," she said, adjusting my necklace. "Remember what we practiced? Make eye contact, speak clearly, and don't let anyone interrupt me," I recited. "And if someone tries to talk over me, I politely but firmly say, 'I wasn't finished.'" Sarah smiled. "Exactly. You've got this, Nick. You're smart, you're talented, and you deserve that promotion just as much as anyone else." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But as I grabbed my purse and headed toward the door, I couldn't shake the familiar feeling that I was about to walk into a room where I'd disappear again. The Uber ride through downtown Chicago was a blur of holiday lights and last-minute pep talks. I watched the city pass by through the window, trying to calm my racing heart. The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "Big night?" he asked. "Company party," I managed. "Well, you look like you're ready to take on the world." If only he knew how wrong he was. As we pulled up to the John Hancock building, I could see other Peterson Marketing employees walking through the lobby in their holiday finest. My colleagues laughed and chatted easily with each other, their voices carrying even through the glass doors. I recognized Jennifer from accounting, who always seemed to have something witty to say in meetings. There was Marcus from the creative department, who could command attention just by clearing his throat. And walking just ahead of them was Amanda Rodriguez, the marketing director who I'd been hoping to impress tonight. I paid the driver and stepped out into the cold December air. The wind whipped around the building, and I pulled my coat tighter around my shoulders. This was it. Tonight, I would make myself heard. The elevator ride to the 95th floor felt like it took forever. I shared the space with a group of Peterson employees I recognized but had never really talked to. They were deep in conversation about some project I wasn't familiar with, their voices overlapping in easy familiarity. "Did you see the numbers from the Morrison campaign?" one of them was saying. "Incredible results. Amanda really knocked it out of the park with that strategy." I wanted to mention that I'd contributed to the research phase of that campaign, that I'd spent hours analyzing consumer data that had informed their approach. But before I could open my mouth, the elevator dinged, and they were walking out, still talking among themselves. The signature room was even more impressive than I'd imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan and the Chicago skyline. The space was decorated with elegant holiday arrangements, and servers moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I stood in the doorway for a moment, taking it all in. The room buzzed with conversation and laughter. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they belonged, who they needed to talk to, what they needed to say. I envied their ease, their natural ability to navigate these social waters. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the room and headed toward the bar. This was my moment. Tonight, I would finally make myself known. I approached the bar with what I hoped was confident stride, my heels clicking against the polished floor. The bartender, a young man with dark hair and a warm smile, looked up as I reached the marble counter. "What can I get you?" he asked, and I felt a small surge of relief. At least someone was acknowledging my presence. "I'll have a glass of white wine, please. Sauvignon Blanc, if you have it." "Coming right up." As he poured my drink, I noticed Amanda Rodriguez standing just a few feet away with two other senior managers. This was perfect. Exactly the kind of opportunity I'd been hoping for. I rehearsed my opening line in my head, something about the Morrison campaign results I'd overheard in the elevator. "Here you go," the bartender said, sliding my wine across the counter. "Thank you," I replied, then turned toward Amanda's group. I took a sip of wine for courage and stepped closer. "Amanda, hi," I said, my voice clear and strong. "I wanted to congratulate you on the Morrison campaign results. The consumer data analysis really paid off." But Amanda was already deep in conversation with Tom Bradley, the senior account manager. "And that's when I knew we had to pivot the entire strategy," she was saying. "The demographics were completely different than what we'd initially projected." I stood there for a moment, waiting for a natural break in their conversation. Tom nodded enthusiastically. "Brilliant move. That's why you're the best at what you do." "Actually," I said, raising my voice slightly, "I remember working on the initial demographic research for that campaign. The data we gathered about the 25 to 35 age group was really interesting." "Oh, Tom, you have to meet Patricia," Amanda interrupted, turning to wave over a woman from across the room. "Patricia, come here. Tom was just telling me about the Henderson account." Patricia joined their circle, and suddenly I was standing on the outside of their conversation again. They launched into a discussion about client management strategies, their voices animated and engaged. I tried to find another opening, but every time I started to speak, someone else would jump in with their own thoughts. After 5 minutes of this, I realized I was just hovering awkwardly at the edge of their group. My cheeks burned with embarrassment as I stepped away, retreating back toward the windows. "Don't give up," I whispered to myself. "That was just one conversation. Try again." I spotted a group of my cubicle neighbors near the appetizer table. These were people I saw every day, people who should know me. Jennifer from accounting was there, along with Mike from the creative department and Lisa from client services. They were laughing about something, and I thought this might be easier than approaching the senior management. "Hey, everyone," I said, joining their circle with what I hoped was a casual smile. "Nick," Jennifer said, though she seemed surprised to see me. "Wow, you look great. I almost didn't recognize you." "Thanks," I replied. "This is such a beautiful venue, isn't it?" "Oh my God, yes," Lisa chimed in. "I was just telling Mike about the time I came here for my cousin's wedding. The view is incredible, but you should have seen the drama that night. The bride's mother and the groom's mother got into this huge fight about the seating arrangements." "That reminds me of my sister's wedding," Mike interrupted. "The in-laws couldn't agree on anything. My sister was in tears by the reception. I waited for them to finish their wedding horror stories, planning to contribute my own tale about my college roommate's disastrous ceremony. But before I could speak, Jennifer launched into another story. "Speaking of disasters, did you guys hear about what happened to the Mitchell account?" "No, what?" Lisa asked, leaning in conspiratorially. "Well, apparently there was this miscommunication with the client about the timeline. I actually worked on some of the preliminary research for that account," I interjected. "The client seemed really concerned about the budget constraints from the beginning, but Jennifer continued as if I hadn't spoken. And now they're threatening to pull the entire contract. Amanda is furious." Mike shook his head. "That's going to be a nightmare to sort out. I think the real issue was that we didn't fully understand their target market." I tried again. "When I was reviewing their previous campaigns, I noticed they'd been struggling with brand consistency." "Oh, there's Amanda now," Lisa said, completely cutting me off. "She looks stressed. I bet she's dealing with the Mitchell situation." The group's attention turned toward Amanda, who was indeed looking tense as she spoke with Mr. Peterson himself. I stood there, my half-finished sentence hanging in the air like a deflated balloon. "I should probably go say hello to some clients," Mike said. And just like that, the group dispersed, leaving me standing alone by the shrimp cocktail. I took a large gulp of wine, feeling the familiar sting of invisibility. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of. It was like I was speaking a different language, or maybe not speaking at all. Had I actually said those things out loud? Or had I just imagined contributing to the conversations? I pulled out my phone and pretended to check messages, just to have something to do with my hands. The party continued around me, a symphony of laughter and animated discussions that I couldn't seem to join. "You okay?" I looked up to find the bartender standing beside me. He must have been making his rounds, checking on guests. "Oh yes, I'm fine," I said, though my voice came out smaller than I intended. "You sure? You look like you could use another drink." I glanced down at my wine glass, surprised to find it nearly empty. "Actually, yes, that would be great." He smiled and took my glass. "Same thing? Please." As he walked away, I caught sight of my reflection in the dark window. I looked put together and professional, but my eyes betrayed my frustration. I'd been at this party for barely an hour, and already I felt like I was failing. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. I'd spent too much time preparing, Too much energy psyching myself up. There had to be someone here who would actually listen to what I had to say. I just had to find them. The bartender returned with my fresh glass of wine, and I noticed his name tag read, Carlos. He lingered for a moment, wiping down the already clean counter. Rough crowd? He asked quietly. I was surprised by his perceptiveness. Is it that obvious? I've worked a lot of corporate events. I see it all the time. People who want to contribute but can't seem to break through. He paused, then added, For what it's worth, I heard what you said about the Mitchell account. You made some good points. You were listening? Hard not to when you're the only one in that group who seemed to know what they were talking about. His words gave me a small boost of confidence. Maybe I wasn't as invisible as I felt. Maybe I just needed to try a different approach. Thanks, I said. I think I need to be more assertive. Carlos nodded. Sometimes you have to speak up louder to be heard. I took his advice to heart and scanned the room for another opportunity. Near the windows, I spotted a group discussing what looked like a serious business matter. I recognized David Chen from the digital marketing team and Sarah Williams from business development. They were with someone I didn't know, a woman in an expensive-looking navy suit who carried herself with obvious authority. This could be my chance. I straightened my shoulders and walked over with renewed determination. The quarterly numbers are impressive, but I'm concerned about sustainability, the woman in the navy suit was saying. We need to think long-term growth, not just quick wins. Absolutely, David agreed. We've been discussing how to balance immediate results with building lasting client relationships. I positioned myself in the group and waited for the right moment. When there was a brief pause, I jumped in. That's exactly what I've been thinking about with the Morrison campaign, I said, my voice stronger than before. The initial results were great, but I noticed some patterns in the data that suggest we might need to adjust our approach for long-term retention. David glanced at me briefly, but then turned back to the woman in the suit. Janet, this is something we should definitely explore in our next strategy meeting. I agree, Janet replied. The data analysis phase is crucial for understanding these patterns. Yes, I said, feeling encouraged. That's why I think we should look at the customer journey mapping I did for the Morrison account. I found some interesting drop-off points that could help us predict. David, did you get a chance to review the proposal I sent over? Janet interrupted, pulling out her phone. I need your feedback before the board meeting next week. And just like that, I was invisible again. David and Janet became absorbed in their discussion about proposals and board meetings, while Sarah Williams checked her own phone and began texting someone. I stood there for a moment, watching them talk around me as if I had never spoken. The familiar feeling of being a ghost in my own workplace washed over me, but this time it was accompanied by something else. Anger. I'd done the work they were discussing. I'd spent hours analyzing that data, identifying those patterns, creating detailed reports that had informed their strategy, but somehow my contributions had been absorbed into the collective knowledge of the team without anyone remembering where they'd come from. Excuse me, I said louder this time. No one looked up. Excuse me, I repeated, but Janet was now showing David something on her phone screen, and Sarah had walked away to join another conversation. I felt my face flush with embarrassment and frustration. This was worse than being ignored. It was like I didn't exist at all. I retreated to the bathroom, my hands shaking as I pushed through the door. The ladies' room was empty, which was a blessing because I felt like I might cry. I gripped the marble sink and stared at my reflection, trying to understand what was happening to me. What am I doing wrong? I whispered to myself. Why can't anyone hear me? I thought about all the preparation I'd done, all the advice I'd read, all the confidence I'd tried to build. None of it seemed to matter. I was still the same invisible person I'd always been. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, my roommate. How's it going? Are you networking like a boss? I stared at the message, not sure how to respond. How could I explain that I felt like I was speaking into a void? That my colleagues treated me like furniture, present but not really there? I typed back, it's going fine, still working on it. But it wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. I took a deep breath and gave myself a pep talk in the mirror. You belong here, Nick. You deserve to be heard. Don't let them make you disappear. When I returned to the party, I was determined to make one more attempt. I spotted Mr. Peterson himself near the dessert table, talking with a small group of senior staff. If I could just get his attention, if I could just make him see me as more than the quiet woman from the corner cubicle, maybe everything would change. I walked over with purpose, rehearsing my words carefully. I would mention the Morrison campaign, the Mitchell account research, anything that would demonstrate my value to the company. Mr. Peterson, I said, stepping into the circle. I wanted to thank you for hosting such a beautiful event. He looked at me with a polite but slightly confused expression. Thank you, it's nice to see you here. The way he said it made it clear he wasn't entirely sure who I was. I'm Nick Thompson, I said, extending my hand. I work in marketing research. I've been with the company for 2 years. Of course, Nick. Good to see you. I wanted to talk to you about the senior marketing coordinator position that was announced. I've been working on several key projects that I think demonstrate my readiness for more responsibility. But before Mr. Peterson could respond, Amanda Rodriguez appeared at his elbow. Mr. Peterson, there's someone I'd like you to meet, she said, completely ignoring my presence. This is Janet Morrison from Morrison Industries. She's been telling me about some exciting opportunities for partnership. And just like that, I was pushed out of the conversation again. Mr. Peterson turned his full attention to Janet, and Amanda began facilitating introductions to other senior staff members. I stood there, watching my boss, the man who would ultimately decide who got the promotion, shake hands and exchange business cards with everyone except me. That's when I realized the horrible truth. I wasn't just being ignored. I was being erased. I found myself back at the bar, my third glass of wine in hand, watching the party continue around me like I was observing it through glass. The view of Chicago's skyline stretched out beyond the windows, the city lights twinkling like stars. But I felt completely disconnected from everything, the party, the city, even myself. Tough night? Carlos asked, appearing beside me again. You could say that. I took a sip of wine, surprised by how bitter it tasted. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you ever feel like you're screaming into a room full of deaf people? Carlos considered this for a moment. I think everyone feels that way sometimes. But in my experience, it's usually not about how loud you're speaking. It's about whether people have decided to listen. His words hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean? I've been bartending corporate events for 5 years. I see the same patterns over and over. Some people walk into a room, and everyone stops to hear what they have to say. Others could set themselves on fire, and people would step around them to get to the appetizers. And what's the difference? Authority, confidence. But mostly it's about whether people already see you as someone worth listening to. I stared at him, processing what he'd said. So you're telling me that no matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, if people have already decided I'm not worth listening to, then I'm stuck? Not stuck, he said carefully. But you might need to change the game instead of just trying to play it better. Before I could ask what he meant, I heard my name being mentioned from across the room. I turned to see Amanda Rodriguez talking to a group of colleagues, and my heart leaped. Maybe someone had finally noticed my contributions. And that's why we need someone who can really take ownership of these projects, Amanda was saying. Someone with initiative and leadership potential. What about Nick Thompson? I heard Jennifer from accounting ask. She's been working on a lot of these campaigns. I held my breath, waiting for Amanda's response. Nick's a sweet girl, Amanda said with a dismissive wave. But she's not really leadership material. She's more of a behind-the-scenes person. Good at following directions, not so much at taking charge. The words felt like a slap. Sweet girl. Behind-the-scenes person, good at following directions. Is that really how they saw me? I think the promotion should go to someone with more presence, Amanda continued. Someone who can command a room and represent the company with clients. I wanted to march over there and tell them exactly what I thought of their assessment. I wanted to list every project I'd worked on, every insight I'd provided, every late night I'd spent perfecting their campaigns. But I couldn't move. I was frozen by the realization that this was how my colleagues really saw me. You heard that, didn't you? Carlos said quietly. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Want to know what I think? I looked at him, this bartender who seemed to see me more clearly than people I'd worked with for 2 years. I think you've been playing by their rules for so long that you've forgotten you have your own voice. You've been trying so hard to fit into their conversations that you've stopped having your own. What do you mean? All night, I've watched you try to add to what other people were saying. You've been trying to prove you belong in their discussions. But what if you started your own? His words sparked something in me. Not quite hope, but something close to it. I don't understand. You know things they don't know? You've done work they haven't done. Instead of trying to get them to include you in their conversations, why not make them want to join yours? I thought about all the research I'd done, all the insights I'd uncovered, all the patterns I'd identified that no one else seemed to notice. What if Carlos was right? What if I'd been approaching this all wrong? But how do I do that without seeming pushy or aggressive? You don't ask for permission to have expertise, Carlos said. You just have it. I was about to ask him to explain when I overheard another conversation that made my blood run cold. Tom Bradley was talking to David Chen near the windows, and I caught fragments of their discussion. The Morrison campaign analysis was brilliant, really showed some sophisticated thinking. Amanda's team outdid themselves with that one, David replied. Actually, I think it was mostly Amanda's work. She has such a gift for data interpretation. I felt my face flush with anger. That was my work they were discussing. My analysis, my insights, my late nights poring over spreadsheets and consumer surveys. Amanda had presented it, but I had created it. "Excuse me," I said, walking over to them with more confidence than I'd felt all night. They looked up, surprised by my interruption. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation about the Morrison campaign analysis," I said. "I wanted to clarify something." Tom looked confused. "Clarify what?" "I was the one who conducted that data analysis. I spent 3 weeks identifying the patterns in consumer behavior that informed the campaign strategy." Amanda presented the findings, but the research was mine. There was an uncomfortable silence. David and Tom exchanged glances, as if they weren't sure whether to believe me. "I'm not trying to take credit away from Amanda," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "She's an excellent presenter and strategist, but I want to make sure the record is clear about who did what work." "Well, of course," Tom said awkwardly. "Team effort and all that." "Yes," I said. "But teams are made up of individuals, and individuals deserve recognition for their contributions." I walked away before they could respond, my heart pounding. I had finally spoken up, finally claimed my work, finally made myself heard. It felt terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. But as I looked around the room, I realized that this was just the beginning. If I wanted to change how people saw me, if I wanted to stop being invisible, I was going to have to do a lot more than just speak up once. I was going to have to completely reinvent myself. The party was winding down, but I felt like I was just getting started. After confronting Tom and David about the Morrison campaign, something had shifted inside me. The familiar anxiety was still there, but it was mixed with something I hadn't felt in a long time: righteous anger. I found myself back at the bar, but this time I wasn't retreating. I was regrouping. "How did that feel?" Carlos asked, refilling my water glass without being asked. "Terrifying, but also good?" I laughed, surprised by my own response. "I keep waiting for the sky to fall, but it hasn't happened yet." "It won't," he said. "Most people respect honesty, even when it makes them uncomfortable." I looked around the room with new eyes. These weren't gods or titans of industry. They were just people who had learned to speak with confidence, who had claimed their space and expertise without apology. There was no reason I couldn't do the same. "Nick!" I turned to see Jennifer from accounting approaching, looking slightly uncomfortable. "I wanted to apologize about earlier. When you were trying to talk about the Mitchell account, I didn't mean to cut you off." "It's okay," I said, though it wasn't entirely true. "No, it's not okay. I do that sometimes. Get so excited about a story that I forget other people want to contribute too." She paused, looking genuinely remorseful. "What were you going to say about the Mitchell account?" For a moment, I was so surprised by her question that I almost didn't answer. When was the last time someone had asked for my opinion and actually waited to hear it? "I was going to say that I think their budget concerns are masking a deeper issue with brand trust," I said. "When I was reviewing their previous campaigns, I noticed they've been struggling with customer retention. I think they're worried about spending money on marketing because they're not sure it's actually working." Jennifer nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. Have you shared this with Amanda?" "I've tried, but..." I trailed off, not wanting to badmouth my boss. "But she's been focused on the immediate crisis," Jennifer finished diplomatically. "Maybe you should put together a brief and send it to her directly. Sometimes it's easier to process complex ideas in writing." "You think she'd read it?" "I think she'd be crazy not to. You know these accounts better than anyone." As Jennifer walked away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: professional respect. Not because I'd demanded it or fought for it, but because I'd simply shared my knowledge with confidence. I was about to head to the coat check when I spotted Mr. Peterson standing alone near the windows, looking out at the Chicago skyline. This might be my last chance to make an impression, but this time I wasn't going to beg for his attention. I was going to offer him something valuable. "Mr. Peterson," I said, approaching him with steady steps, "I hope you don't mind me interrupting your quiet moment." He turned, and I was surprised to see that his expression was more welcoming than confused this time. "Not at all, Nick. How are you enjoying the party?" "It's been enlightening," I said honestly. "I've been thinking about the challenges facing our clients, and I wanted to share an observation with you." "I'm listening." "I've been analyzing patterns across our major accounts, and I've noticed something interesting. The clients who are threatening to reduce their marketing spend, Morrison Industries, Mitchell Holdings, even the Henderson account, they all have one thing in common. Mr. Ayao." Peterson's eyebrows rose slightly. "What's that?" "They're all companies that have been with us for more than 3 years, and they're all in industries that have become more competitive recently. I think they're not just questioning our services. They're questioning whether traditional marketing approaches are still effective in their evolving markets." "That's actually a very astute observation," he said, his tone more engaged than I'd ever heard it. What do you think we should do about it? I think we need to position ourselves as strategic partners, not just service providers. Instead of defending our current approaches, we should be proactively helping them adapt to their changing landscapes. Mr. Peterson nodded slowly. Have you put together any specific recommendations? I have some preliminary ideas, but I'd like to do more research before presenting them formally. Would you be interested in seeing a strategic analysis once I've completed it? Very interested, he said. Please send it to me directly when you're ready. As I walked away from that conversation, I felt like I was floating. Not because Mr. Peterson had validated me, but because I had validated myself. I had spoken with authority about something I knew, and he had listened. The coat check was nearly empty by the time I retrieved my things. As I waited for my Uber, I reflected on the evening. I had started the night trying to fit into other people's conversations, desperate to be included. I was ending it having started my own conversations, sharing my own insights, claiming my own expertise. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. How did it go? Are you the new senior marketing coordinator yet? I smiled as I typed back. Not yet, but I think I'm finally ready to be. The Uber ride home was quiet, but my mind was racing with possibilities. I thought about the research I wanted to do, the strategic analysis I wanted to present, the recommendations I wanted to make. For the first time in my career, I wasn't thinking about how to get people to listen to me. I was thinking about what I wanted to say. Carlos had been right. I had been trying to play by their rules, trying to squeeze myself into their conversations, trying to prove I belonged in their discussions. But I had my own knowledge, my own insights, my own value to offer. I didn't need permission to be an expert. I already was one. When I got home, Sarah was waiting up for me, curled up on the couch with a cup of tea. So, she said, setting down her mug, tell me everything. I sat down beside her, trying to figure out where to start. I learned something tonight. What's that? I learned that being heard isn't about speaking louder. It's about believing that what you have to say is worth hearing. Sarah smiled. And do you believe that? I thought about my conversation with Mr. Peterson, about Jennifer asking for my opinion, about the moment I had finally claimed credit for my work. Yeah, I said. I think I do. The promotion announcement wouldn't come for another 2 weeks, but I had a feeling that regardless of the outcome, I had already won something more important. I had found my voice. And I was never going to let anyone make me invisible again.